Okay, so this is the next episode of All Apologies, Guilt, and Blame. It's my third podcast and third book in my series Life Beyond Silence. The first book is or was titled Not a Victim or Survivor, Life Beyond Domestic Violence and Rape. My second was Losing Touch with Reality. Um, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, other avenues. Um, I will say that the second and third book, I have to finish getting loaded into Amazon, but um, they were all published many, many years ago. But I decided to do the podcasts on the series because it would give me another avenue in which listeners could ask me questions and comments on my life, for which I guess my third book, titled All Apologies, says it all. I take full blame and I have lots of regrets and guilt over basically everything in my life. I've literally made so many mistakes and I've hurt so many people, including myself. And I've lived in through so much pain and guilt over the years that it's undescribable. But I've done my best in my series to say how I know that if I had made different life choices, maybe things would have been different for me. But I know that you can't go back. And if I could, I would. But I would never want to change having my children. And I do take responsibility for everything I ever did. But there's no way to undo it. If someone could cut off my arms and say, we'll cut your arms off and then you'll be accepted, you'll be forgiven, I would let them. That's the truth. I would let them do that if that would mean that all would be forgiven and that my heartbreak, my pain would go away. But it doesn't. And I know the mistakes that I made will forever follow me. They have, and it's been decades. But my mistakes have followed me for years. And I've had to accept the life that I've been dealt. Not so much dealt, because I believe that, yeah, you're dealt a life that maybe God knew that you were to have, but a lot of what happens to you, I believe, are your choices. You know, free will. But my choices were horrible and obviously unforgivable. I still have a lot of pain that I carry, but over the years, especially at my age now, I've made peace with it. Nobody else had to forgive me for that because absolutely nobody ever would forgive me or has even, I guess, thought about forgiving me. But I've made peace with it, and I had to. It was eating me alive for years, eating me alive. That every turn that I made, it seemed like I just dug myself a deeper hole. But over the years, I have made peace with my actions, and I've said to myself, there are many people in this world that do horrible things, and yet their family still understands that they've paid the price, and they let them back in. They have connection with them. They at least call and check on them. They at least acknowledge that they're family. But and I'm not saying word for word that I don't get phone calls or anything like that. I'm just saying that I get it that I made a lot of bad choices, and I get it that I did a lot of things that my family disagreed with. But I've paid my price. And I'm old now. And I have a little dog. And it's me and my dog. All my children are grown. They all have families of their own. They're all members of society that are thriving. And I am full of grief, but I'm very proud of my children and only want the best for them. But I do think that I've paid my dues. They don't have to forgive me, I know that. And I'll probably go to my grave carrying the guilt and the blame. But that's okay. I get it. But I do think, even though I made a lot of mistakes, I do think I'm not the worst person in the world. And I am probably not the last person to make mistakes in their life that they regret and that they can't change. And I think my podcast and my books in my series could help someone like myself out there struggling to know that they're not alone, that other people make mistakes, and that no matter what life or what trauma that they're going through, they can survive, and they can get through it, and they can forgive themselves and get peace, which is really what anyone that's carrying pain around needs, is peace. Anyway, so I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last episode. My fourth husband, Phil, for lack of better words, had just jacked off in the Kmart parking lot, and someone had seen him and turned him in to the police, and he had been arrested, and my whole world had been flipped upside down. I just couldn't fathom how, even though he was apologizing, I just couldn't fathom how somebody wouldn't know that's against the law or wouldn't understand how that made him look. Even though I thought, yes, it was a fantasy, a voyeurism fantasy that he had harbored for years, I just thought in my head, he is delusional if he thinks that's not going to be looked at as some kind of predator-like issue, and that he's going to be looked at and probably given some kind of sentence by the judge where he won't be allowed to go near schools. And I don't know. I was just in shock. But even though we were desperately trying to figure out what the path forward looked like, that one incident was not the only one. Within days or weeks, it was like literally a week or two afterwards that there came a knock at the door. And I went and opened the door, and it was a sheriff's deputy who handed me papers saying I had to go to court for the prosecution of my husband for sexual assault, I guess you would say. I don't remember the wording exactly, but as I was reading the paper and just dropping to my knees, it was explaining that there had been some kind of sexual contact with a neighbor of mine. And it listed her name, and it listed my husband's name, and an incident, and it didn't explain it all. And I called him at work, and he got off and came home, and I was just freaked out. And I remember I said, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, God, I was hoping that wouldn't..." I guess he was hoping it wouldn't come to me. And he said, excuse me, I didn't mean to yawn. But I did yawn. Probably because I've told this story a million times. But never gets old. Anyway, the point is, he started talking, and I just couldn't imagine anything worse than what had just happened. And yet it was. It was, in my head, completely the icing or the cherry on top of the ice cream or the icing on the cake. This was going to be horrible on top of the other, back to back. And I just couldn't breathe. I was in shock. I don't think I ever got over the first shock, but I was definitely still in shock. And it was getting worse by the minute. but he started to explain that he had been calling my neighbor and making advances to her, that they had struck up a flirtatious relationship, and that he had gone over to her house when I didn't know it, of course, and he had made an advance toward her physically, and she had said no, and he backed off. According to him, the minute she said no, he backed off, but yet she filed charges against him days later, and he felt like she filed charges because her husband had found out that he had been over there, and in order to get out of that situation with her husband, she said that it was, the advances were unwarranted. Something to that effect. And I was like, what are you talking about? You know, it said sexual assault. It said much more than advances. And he said, no, it didn't. He said, it was just the wording or the charges in general. He said, but basically there was nothing. It wasn't like he raped her. It wasn't like he hurt her in any way. He had just made an advance that she did not maybe want. And when her husband found out, she said she never wanted me to come over, that I just came over and made the advance, and she pushed me away. And I was like, I I don't understand any of this. Why would you even think about being with her? We had known them for a very short period of time. We'd played cards with them. It was a nice enough couple of people, but we had talked about them, and we had said we don't want to have anything to do with them. They evidently are not the best parents. They're evidently not the kind of people we want to hang out with. They party, they drink, they smoke, they possibly do other drugs. We just don't want to be involved in that or have our kids around that. We literally have run these people down, and yet you're saying to me that you went over there and made advances and had a flirtatious relationship with her. What are you talking about? Like, that's all I could think about was, of all the women out there in this world, couldn't you have gone to a bar and picked up a pretty person that was wanting your advances? Couldn't you have picked up somebody somewhere else that actually wanted your advances, that wasn't going to file charges? This lady is the scum of the earth. Like, that is my thoughts. And you and me both talked about them. I get it. She's thinner than me. But she also looks like she's been rode hard and put up wet. Like, I get it. I probably will get flack for saying negative things about a woman that my disgusting fourth husband made advances at. I get it. And I get what you might be thinking. But you have to have been in there and understood that this woman who had come to our house with her husband and played cards with us, we had discussed it at how she was just a basket case. Like, she and him both were literally struggling more than us. And we were struggling. But they were like, I don't know. They were just, they both looked like they had really come through hell and back. And they probably had vices that we didn't want to be around our children. And yet, this is who he picks. This is, of all the women out there in this world, this is who he picks to have a flirtatious relationship with and make a sexual advance towards. I just was floored again. As if you could be floored again. Like I was under the flooring. I was like under the rafters of the house. Like I was like deep below the surface. I literally, I mean, you think about it. If your husband has an affair on you, which happens every day in this world, people have affairs. But usually people have affairs with people that are willing. And he literally picked somebody that was not only unwilling, but filed charges. And this woman had not a good reputation. She had no good qualities. And I'm saying that even though possibly people think I have no good qualities. Actually, I'm pretty sure my family thinks I have no good qualities. But the point is, this woman was a piece of cake. She was literally something like I couldn't even fathom knowing what her husband looked like and what she looked like. I couldn't even fathom her saying no to an affair with my husband. It was like she must have literally walked him out the door and then her husband drove up to see him walking away. For her to like have done this way. Or she thought we had enough money that we could pay her off. I don't know why that went down the way it went down. Still to this day, I have no idea. I just know that he did go to court and it did get dropped, and it got dropped down as far as charges to like what's it called when you go to somebody else's property? Trespassing. Something like that. It was like something menial that it got dropped off to. But the damage was done. I mean, literally, here he was, this sexual predator that had jacked off in the Kmart parking lot, and like weeks later, charges had been brought up against him, and he'd been picked up for this. So that makes him look guilty of both, if not worse. And he said, well, actually, this one came before the Kmart parking lot thing. And I'm like, I don't understand any of this. Like, I don't understand any of this. And I don't know who's lying. You know, maybe I'll just walk over to my neighbors and ask what exactly happened. And his attorney said, oh no, don't do that. If you go over there, it could be really, really bad. And to be honest, I think I did go over there. I remember at least walking towards her house. But I think either her or her husband just shut the door on me. And I don't think it amounted to anything. I think I just asked, could I hear the story from them? And they just shut me down. But I did want to know, and still do, what brought all that about. But I never found out. I just know that immediately after everything hit the news, my first husband decided it was the right time. He's been waiting for it for years, and he decided he had enough now to take my daughter from me. And I got papers saying that he wanted custody. And I just remember being speechless. Like, I got my attorney, and he said he has every right to take her from you now. He found enough evidence against you to take her from you. And you're probably going to lose this fight. And I just didn't know what to say. But he knew the situation with Phil, and he said, you can file for a divorce right now and kick him out, and you'll be able to keep your daughter, because this just came about, and if you kick him out, you're not approving of it, and the judge will say your daughter can stay with you. And Phil and me talked about it, and he said, I get it. I fucked up, and whatever happens, I love you, but I get it. You have to do what you have to do. So we did. We got a divorce, and I won the case and got to keep my daughter. So, yeah. All of this whole story can be found in the first episode, and more in the second episode, or the second book, rather. First book, second book, first podcast, second podcast, and now here's the third podcast. And you'll hear different pieces of it in each podcast, I guess. But, yeah, that's what happened. I was forced into a divorce, even though I had a 2-year-old little boy who needed his father. I was forced into a divorce because that was the only way of winning the case against my first husband and keeping my daughter. But there's a lot more to the story. My fourth husband and me, it was bad. I was in shock. I was crying all the time. I don't think I actually can put into words how depressed I was and how upset I was. Of course, I was happy to have won the case and happy to continue to have my daughter with me. But my first husband was evil, just pure evil. He was an alcoholic. He had been searching for a reason to get back at me for years. And he knew that taking my daughter from me would be his ultimate way of saying screw you. I don't think he ever truly loved her. I think he just wanted to hurt me. And I was depressed. I looked at my son every day and knew how much he looked like his father. And Phil and me were talking on the phone every day. And I was a basket case. I was not working. I was trying to pay bills. Phil was trying to send me money, but he didn't have that much money. He did leave and go to Louisiana. His family, some of his family was there, and he got a job driving the truck, and he was, I think he was delivering milk at the time, or Coke. I think it was Coke, actually. And he was working, and we would talk on the phone, and I would cry, and there just was no help for me. My family was so happy that I had cut him loose and sent him on his way, but nobody was there for me. I was in my rental home with my children, trying to pay bills, in the same town that my first husband was, who was coming to get my first daughter on his visitation, and enjoying every minute of the fact that he had torn my life apart. And I remember my sister was talking to me one day, and she said words that have hung with me for years. She said, I know you're depressed, but you can just go find another man. You do it all the time. Just go find someone else and start a new life. Maybe you won't find the same kind of men that you always seem to do. And I don't remember her words exactly, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, basically just go find another. And I remember I was desperate. I was like, what? And in my head I was thinking, yeah, I'll probably find another. But also in my head I was thinking, I don't want to find anyone else. This is my husband. He's my ex-husband now, but I still love him. No matter what I've been through, I look at his son every day, every minute of the day, and I think, I've never been able to hold on to anything in my life. And this little boy needs his father. And I remember I talked to my daughter, and my daughter was like, Mom, I get it if you want to go be with Phil. I'll just go live with my dad. It won't be any different than when I live with you. I'll just see you when I see my dad. And I'm like, no, it's going to be different. Because if I go live with Phil, we'll be in Louisiana. And I won't see you like that. Because your dad will never allow it. So basically, you could see your grandmother, but you couldn't see me. And I don't know what to do. And here I was asking a 12-year-old. How much of a fucking mistake was that? And I know it was a mistake. And I know it was a horrible mistake. But the only thing I can say in my defense is I was depressed. I was despondent. I was tormented. I was falling apart. I was like a zombie. I took care of my kids. I barely took care of the house. I barely took care of my hygiene. I cooked and cleaned very little. I was just trying to hold on every single day to my sanity. And nobody, absolutely nobody knows what was in my head. There's a lot of people in my family even that thinks that I am just this terrible, terrible fucking mother who would do these fucking things, and that, yeah, I was a terrible fucking mother. And I'll agree with them. I'll agree with everything they want to say about me. That I made horrible mistakes, that this was a mistake, that everything I did was a mistake, however they want to say it. But I know that I was falling apart. And I can tell you honestly that if you had a marriage ripped from you, like your soul being ripped out of your body by your first husband, who was a lowlife himself, and who was someone that just wanted revenge on you and had put you through hell for years. I will grant you that if you had 4 children and your first husband knocked on that door every single minute he could, to not because he wanted to see his daughter, but because he wanted to see you. He wanted to see how hard his knife was stuck inside of you. How much more he could shove it inside of you by knocking on the door every single time he could, so that he could get her and hurt you and watch your life crumble. I would grant you that if that was you living through that nightmare, and at the same time looking at your 2-year-old little boy who looked just like his dad, and how you're basically living moment for moment, I would grant you, you would be a zombie too. You are literally falling apart. And people that should love you and should care about you are saying, don't worry, you'll just find another. That's what you do, right? You'll just find someone else. Yeah. Yeah. I was struggling. So I literally did what I always do. Made a huge bad decision. A decision that has, over the years, or literally at that moment, a decision that cost me a life's worth of pain. I chose to leave my daughter in my grandmother, or my mother's care, which is her grandmother. I left her with my mom and left for Louisiana. I heard what my daughter had said, and I did. I saw a healthy, loving, happy child who really truly thought that it was okay for her mom to leave. And I told her, if it's not what you want, just tell me. I won't go. But she said, it's okay. I understand. And I was such a horrible mom that I believed my 12-year-old over my own thoughts at that time. I don't think I was in sound mind and body. I don't think there's any way that I was thinking this is a bad decision. All I was thinking is she said I could go. And I truly believe my 12 years with her will outweigh the next 6 with my ex. And if I leave, my son will have his father. That's all I could think in my head. If we had never had a son, I probably, most definitely, would not have gone. But there was something about looking at my son and focusing in on the fact that he was going to grow up without his father. And how unfair that was when my ex knocked on the door every other weekend at exactly the moment he was supposed to get her. And smiled in doing it. He literally would look me straight through, like he was shooting daggers into me and enjoying every moment that he had ripped apart my life. And yeah, I made the most horrible, undefendable choice. I left my daughter and went to Louisiana with my 3 other children. And in my head I was thinking, it's so funny. They strip him from my family. They take him, the dad, away from my kids because of the health and safety of my firstborn, but yet nobody looks at the 3 others. Like literally, if I chose to keep him in Henderson, Kentucky, if I had chose to keep him and given up my daughter in court, that would have been okay. Because they weren't after the other 3. They were just after her for my first husband. They were just going to award him custody of her, and the fact that she could never be around me because of my low-life husband who was such a sexual predator, but I could still keep the other 3. If you look back at it, I was thinking in my head all these different thoughts, and I was thinking, If they had said, you have to give up all of your children because you're left with a sexual predator, then I would have never gone. I would have stayed because of my 4 children. Why was my firstborn's safety being taken over all of them? Nobody was after all of them. It just didn't make sense. None of it made sense. And I get it. You can sit there and look at me and say, why are you even trying to make sense of it? Aren't you trying to somehow justify your actions? No, absolutely not. I am not trying to justify my actions. Not in any way. I made a horrible decision. I, number one, asked a 12-year-old a question. Number two, I wasn't thinking clearly. Number three, yeah, I was trying to justify it in my own mind any way I could so that I could gather my thoughts, so that I could wake up every day and my feet hit the floor and me get my kids off to school and me feed them and me take care of a 2-year-old. I was trying to justify it just for my own sanity, so I wouldn't kill myself or do something way worse, which is all I thought about. Not harming my kids, of course, but all I could think about was, what are my next steps? Do I kill myself because I'm a low-life, terrible person and all I've ever done is mistake after mistake? Or do I go to Louisiana, which is going to be pretty much the same thing? Or do I stay here and meet somebody else? Not that I can't, but do I do that in hopes that I don't find a serial killer that kills me and the kids, or someone that sells drugs out of our home? What are my hopes for the future? Do I have any hopes for the future? Pretty much not, because every chance that I have had in life, I have been a disappointment to my entire fucking family. Even though I'm a nurse, even though I've tried my best, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. I was the black sheep of the family, and every fucking chance that I had ever gotten, I had blown it. Just completely blown it. And I knew that. I still know that. Like, I knew that way before the incident had ever happened, that I was the black sheep of the family, and every chance I got, I was going to make the wrong decision, especially in the eyes of my family. And I knew it then. I had won in court, and they were so proud that I had kicked him to the curb, but nobody was coming to, like, give me any kind of support. Nobody was there to say, let's help you get to our town so that we can help you raise these children. Everybody had just left. And they lived in other towns. And here I was, raising my children. And how was I going to function? Which is a unique word. Functioning adult. Which means you are able to feed, bathe, and live alone or live in society. A functioning adult, technically, is most people. Even homeless people are pretty much functioning adults. They can get around, they have their mind enough to take care of themselves, go from shelter to shelter, find food at homeless shelters or food banks or whatever, and they can survive without pretty much anybody's help. So they're technically a functioning adult. Gee, that's a good way of basically wording me at the time. I was a functioning mother and adult. But I was falling apart inside. But yeah, I take every bit of the guilt and the blame and the pain and the torment and the agony and the depression and the suicidal thoughts. I take all of it. I remember all of it. There's things I've forgotten over the years, but pretty much that one time in my life, I remember everything, especially how I felt. Especially how I felt. And my family and me disagree. They see me as somebody who was literally going to do whatever I was going to do for me. Not for my children, but for me. And here's another thing. Maybe you don't know. Even though I thought my ex was a alcoholic, I knew him to be an alcoholic for years. I didn't think he would be a terrible dad. I knew he wanted to get revenge against me, and I knew he actually never loved her like he should have. But I didn't think he was going to be a horrible dad to her after he got her. I thought he was just a horrible person to me. Plus, he was remarried, so I thought, surely he's got a stable life. She told me that he had always been like this Disneyland dad, taken her places and bought her stuff, and that they had a big house, and yeah. Well, that didn't happen. So his misgivings at being a good dad after he got her has been handed to me. He was a horrible dad to her and did supposedly horrible things himself, but that was all my fault because I gave her to him. That's the way it's looked upon. I guess they forgive him for all of his misgivings because it was my fault, because I gave her to him. Yeah, I left her with my mother, but I knew that he would come for her because he was her dad, and legally he had custody over her when my mother didn't. But my mother did get um, the ability to see her, have visitation with her, because I had left. But I still think about all those feelings, all those emotions, everything that I went through. And I still think about her. Would it have been different if I had made different choices? Absolutely. Do I wish that I did make different choices? Absolutely. But would I have been able to give her the life that she got? No. I didn't have the money or the ability to give her that life. She left me at 12, lived with my mother, lived with my ex-husband, visited my mother, graduated with honors, and went on to do great things with her life. Would her life have played out differently if she had stayed with me as her mother? I'm not saying they would have changed anything for her, but they could have. And I would never have wanted to take her dreams, because she is a good and an amazing person. And I don't know that her living her life with me, if it would have turned out the way it did for her. I mean, her dad did have money, and my family did have money, and she was able to be provided for above, well and above my means. Am I saying that that justifies what I did? No, I'm not. I'm not saying that in the least. Nothing justifies what I did. Nothing. And if I could take it back, I would have done that tenfold if I could have done that. Literally, almost from the moment that I did it. I have literally, from the moment I did it, regretted it. But the minute I drove away, from Kentucky, the minute I arrived in Louisiana, every part of it changed everything. There was no turning around and going back and saying, oops, my bad. Nope, nope, nope. That would never have happened. And I don't care if they agree or disagree with that. It's the truth. The minute my ex knew that I had left her, or the minute I walked away and drove to Louisiana and my mother knew that I had left her, nope, I would have never gotten her back. Never. Not one iota. Even if I had turned around and went back, I would have never gotten her back. I would have been labeled, or I was labeled, an abandoning mother, an abandoning parent who did not deserve visitation or the ability to win back my child. I literally made the most horrible mistake that anybody can make. I'm right up there with people that drop their kids off at fire stations and walk away. Because even if that parent drops a child off because they think that either they're addicted to drugs or they're too young to raise it or for whatever reason, in the eyes of the law, nah, they're never going to get that kid back. Yeah, they did it for whatever reason that they had in their head, like they couldn't take care of it or whatever. But they're never going to get that kid back. Now, things have changed over the years. People can go to parent classes and they can go to rehab and they can do this and they can do that. And there are some people that get their child back. And I totally agree with that. Maybe for the instance that you give them up, you can't deal. You just can't deal. But you deserve a chance to have them back. I get that. If you can prove that you can take care of them and that you're sorry in some way that you went through this horrible part in your life, but you've now gotten your shit together, there's some people that get their kids back. There's people that go to jail for crimes and they actually get their kid back when they get out of jail. But not me. I did something so horrible, especially in the eyes of my family, that I never ever deserved the opportunity, even after she got to be a young adult, to have somebody look at her and say, your mom paid her dues. She did the wrong thing. She regrets it. And she's still your mother. She's still your mother and she loves you. And you should at least give her a chance. Nobody ever did that for me. And I get it. My daughter's her own person. She's an adult. She doesn't have to make up with me. She doesn't have to give me another chance. She doesn't have to talk to me. She doesn't have to look at me. I get it. I can just never have her in my life again. But I get it. That's the way it played out. It wasn't how I wanted it. And I get that I made plenty of mistakes to make it that way. But I do love her. I think about her most every day. I follow her life. I have pictures of her, pictures of my granddaughter, There's not a day in my life that I don't wish things were different. And I love her with all my heart. And I love my granddaughter that I've never seen. And I have things for them. But I can't undo what was done. And over all these decades, I have carried so much pain. And I know that she's lived without her mom. And that must be hard. But I can't change the way she feels. And I acknowledge how she feels. And I think that my mother had so much to do with it, amongst other people, like her dad, her stepmom, my mom's boyfriend. There's so many people, my sister even, that told her I was not worthy of forgiveness because I was selfish and that I was a horrible mother that didn't deserve it. And I'll admit, like I said, I'll take all the blame and all the guilt, and I'll admit I did unforgivable things throughout my life. But I love her, and she's my baby. She's my firstborn, and that's my grandbaby. Now, I don't know. I've never known if I will see her or talk to her or be able to see my granddaughter one single time before I die. I don't know. But I doubt it. I truly doubt it. You know, I had a heart attack last year, and I've been a nurse for years. I knew the heart attack was going to come someday. But to be honest, and you'll hear about it later on, but to be honest, I didn't even know I was actually having a heart attack. I was so caught up in my own medical advice that I was waiting for something that I knew, something that I had seen in other people, other patients. Whether it be straight on chest pain or doubling over, and I literally kept thinking I'm gonna lose my breath, or the pain's gonna be a stabbing pain right in the middle of my chest, or I'm gonna be nauseous. I was thinking, I'll have something that will tell me this is a real heart attack. But at the time, I was doing dishes, I was cleaning, I was doing laundry, and I had pain in my arms, but it wasn't like doubling over pain. I was just having pain in my arms, and it would help when I would hold them. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as bad when I would kind of hold one arm with the other, kind of crisscrossing my arms to kind of hug myself. And I was taking ibuprofen because I thought, well, why are my arms hurting? Both arms, not just the left arm, but both arms. And I'm not really feeling that much pain in my chest. It's in my back a little bit, but mainly it's in my arms. And I just kept waiting for something else. It was a Sunday. It was an inconvenient day. My third daughter's dad was in town, and I didn't want to say anything like, I think I need to go to the hospital. And I thought, if it gets bad, I'll drive myself to the hospital. And I thought about it over and over again that day. Should I go to the hospital? Should I not go to the hospital? What if this is a heart attack? It's probably not a heart attack. Tomorrow's Monday. I'll call somebody. It was crazy. But even in the midst of all of that, I thought about my firstborn. And I thought about, if I do have a heart attack and I am dying, will she come to the hospital? Will she even care? Will my mother tell her, you should at least go to see her before she dies? Will anybody say that? And sure enough, when all of it went down, nobody said that. My mother did talk to me when she found out that I had had a heart attack and that I was going in for surgery. She did talk to me several times, my mother, and she never once thought that my oldest daughter might lose me and should come at least to see me. Just once. Pretty much, I guess everybody thought I'd live through it, and I did. I had surgery, had a massive heart attack, but I had surgery and I lived through it. Yep. Good for me, right? Good for me. Okay, so let's get back to the story. I'm gonna stop here. I need to stop here if you don't care. I will pick this up again in the next episode. But I get it. Everybody hates me. I'm definitely not a good mom. I get it. I've gotten it for many, many years. lived with the pain and agony and guilt and blame for decades now. And I get it. I'm deserving of it. And I don't know why I'm still here. It's probably my fate, my torment, my atonement. It's probably all of that to have lived as long as I have and dealt with what I did. Maybe that's just what was meant for me to have somehow paid my dues on earth by having to carry this around for as long as I have. I get it. Anyway, I'm going to get off here for right now. I'll be back. Thank you for listening to my podcast. I truly appreciate it. And for anybody out there that's living through the pain that I've been living through or anything like it, any trauma survivors, just know that you're not the only one. That you're not by yourself. And you will survive, just as I have. You may carry that pain for years, but you'll survive. And hopefully you'll find peace and solace. I think the best way to put it is, over the years, I realized even if I had nobody else, God knew what was in my heart. God knew how I truly felt and how painful it was for me. Or is for me, however you want to put it. But I think God knows where my heart is, where my mind is. And I know God was with me then. I know that God knew how difficult everything was for me, and how depressed I was, and how much of a zombie I was, but how I still wanted to get up every morning and take care of my little boy and my other children. And I think He got me through it. Anyway, I'm going to get off. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do these podcasts not knowing what will come out of my mouth, but I try my hardest to explain myself. To not just read what I wrote so many years ago, but to actually add to it and let you know how I feel now. Anyway, I'm going to get off here and I will be back. Thank you.